The hall smelled of oil and old iron, and the light that fell through the high windows broke upon drifting motes of dust as if they were embers in a dying hearth. Beneath the spikes and blades of the throne, courtiers clustered like fish in a tide-pool, murmuring, craning necks, hungry for the first sign of blood. Eddard Stark stood in that churn of whispering silk and soft boots. The chill of the north settled under his skin even here at the heart of summer. The guards he had left were too few after Jory and the Lannister ambush. Alan and Tomard and a half-dozen others in gray and ice all seemed scarce as candles in a windy place. Behind him, the gold cloaks of the city watch kept their blunt iron faces turned toward the dais and the boy who sprawled above the realm. Joffrey's feet did not touch the step. His face made him look younger than his years, the lemon-bright hair making a crown before any circlet was set to his brow. His mouth a small, proud gash. Where one child might have blinked at the sea of faces, this boy feasted. He sucked at the attention. And beside him, upon a chair not so high as the throne but high enough for a queen, Cersei Lannister sat erect as a spear, her gown a violence of crimson and gold. She did not look at Ned. Her gaze was set upon the hall, upon the lords and lesser men who had come at the Queen Regent's summons to see a boy be king. Ser Barristan Selmy stood before the throne with the white of the King's Guard falling from his shoulders like winter-shed snow. The old knight held himself so still he looked carved, only the veins on his hands and the quick blink of old blue eyes living there. Meryn Trant and Boros Blunt flanked the dais, hands on hilts, eyes empty. The Hound lounged at the base of the steps, one knee up, the burned half of his face shadowed by the hall's pitch-dark corners. Varys was a soft moon in lilac silk, Littlefinger a smile with a man behind it, Grand Maester Pycelle a beard. They were arranged like pieces placed by a careful hand. Ned Stark had never been careful enough at such games. He felt for the weight of the letter in the breast of his jerkin where it lay like a stone, Robert's hand upon it, Robert's breath upon him as he had signed. Protector of the realm until the king's rightful heir should come of age. Not son. He had written the word himself, changing it, sealing his own path. And now the moment had arrived. A herald banged a staff upon the floor hard enough to startle the birds that nested in the rafters. Make way for the Lord Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, Protector of the Realm. The title struck sparks in the murmuring dark. Littlefinger's mouth curled. Varys folded plump hands under his stomach. Cersei lifted one fine brow in lazy disdain. Joffrey smirked and spread his arms and looked at the hall as if it were a far green field he might hunt. "Kneel," he cried, his voice breaking with the weight he put upon it. "Kneel and swear your fealty." Ned walked forward. The black steel of the throne was a thorn thicket, a winter oak with all its leaves hardened into knives. He had watched Robert sit that throne and turn his head into the wind and pretend not to hear the iron singing under him. Robert had been fat and loud and careless as only the victorious can be. Robert had died because the gods are not mocked forever. Ned came to the small space before the steps, his knee bending, the scar in his leg singing, and then he halted before it touched the stone. He took out the letter. A hush moved through the hall like a beast. Cersei shifted. Joffrey's mouth fell open, then tightened. Barristan's head turned almost imperceptibly, an old hound scenting something in the brush. "His Grace Robert Baratheon," Ned said, and his voice carried to the far arches. "King of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Defender of the Realm." He unfolded the parchment, wax hard and broken only moments ago under the Great Seal. His hand wrote these words. His hand set his seal. "The realm will hear them." Pycelle waddled forth, beard trembling, eyes like wet pebbles. "There is an order in these matters," he wheezed. "There are forms. The small council." "Be silent," Cersei said without looking at him, and the maester was obedient in the way of men who have learned just how far their learning takes them. A thread of fear, fine as spun glass, drew across the queen's mouth. Ned read. He read and heard Robert's breath again, the rasp of it as boar's tusks drank his life. He heard the old laughter under the pain. The letter was clean of doubt, clean of flattery. It named him Protector. It required obedience. When he had done, the parchment lay open in his hands like a white hand spread upon a dark table. He did not look at Cersei, not yet. He looked to Barristan Selmy. The Lord Commander inclined his head the tiniest degree. "The king's word is law," Ser Barristan said, and everything that followed would balance upon that quiet sentence. Cersei seized the path he had left her. "Indeed," she said more brightly than the moment deserved. She stood, grace poured into danger. "The king's word is law, and his grace our Joffrey is now that law, by birth and blood, as all here know." She slid down a step, hand floating, white. "You ask us to respect the dead king's command. So do we. We respect it so much we have brought the king himself to be witness to it. Bend your knee, Lord Stark." She smiled with her eyes. "Or do your northern gods counsel treason?" Ned saw the seven, painted on the windows, flickering upon stone, tremble as clouds shifted across the sun. He turned the letter so that all might see the bold hand, the signature that wavered only at the end where death had touched it. "The dead king's command," he repeated, "and let the words at last find Cersei. He made me protector until his rightful heir came of age." He drew breath hard as a winter draft. "Joffrey is no rightful heir." The silence broke as 1,000 tiny pieces of glass. The boy leapt to his feet. "I am the king." His voice cracked and shrieked. "Seize him, Ser Meryn." "Hold," Barristan said. A single word, and Meryn Trant's foot hesitated upon the step without his knowing it. The old knight did not turn his head. His hand was upon his hilt. Cersei looked carved and shining. "You will watch your tongue, Stark. This talk is an offense. The truth can offend," Ned said. He found the book Pycelle's servants had carried in earlier at his command. The weighty tome of lists upon lists, bastards and lineages, marriages, colors of hair, a dry sea heavier than steel. He had slept over it in these last hard nights. He had dreamed of it as a man might dream of a cold river he had to cross in armor. He passed the book to Alan so the lad might hold it flat, the pages marked with twine. "I will offend, and I will be plain. His hair is not the king's hair. His mother's hair is gold. His father's hair is gold. The king's hair was black. The king's seed is strong. It breeds true." He tapped the open leaf. "For 500 years where a Baratheon weds, black follows. Look at the king's bastards. Look at them wherever they are found. Gendry in the street of steel with a hammer in his hands. Bara, a babe at a mother's breast. Black hair, black eyes, not gold." He lifted his head. "Look at Joffrey." If the boy had had the sense to stand in silence, if his mother had had the grace to show a tremor, the hall might have swung the other way. But Joffrey was a creature of display. He grabbed at the hilt he had no right to carry, a pretty thing chased with prancing stags, and thrust it out in a jerk to point down at Ned, and his cheeks were bright with anger and shame, and he squealed, "I'll have your head, you traitor! I'll—" "Be quiet," Cersei said so low it slashed. She did not seem to breathe as she took the step down. "And throw that book away," she told Pycelle, who cowered from the weight of it. "It is a scholar's toy, proves nothing. The king's seed is strong? This is rutting in kitchens and alleyways you speak of. The seven keep all of us from the consequences of bastardy. There is no proof here, Lord Stark. Only your insult and your ambition." Her green eyes burned cold. "You have never forgiven me that my husband loved me and not the ghost of a girl with blue roses. And so you mean to steal from my son his birthright and give it to your cold fish of a friend who scorns this city and all in it. I will not allow it. It might have held there. It might have gone to shouting, to argument, to a slow bleeding." Ned had thought to spring the trap with gentleness, to let the book gnaw at doubt until men like Selmy and Slint and the rest moved to him not from shock but from certainty. But he had held the truth too long. He had seen Jory cut down in the mud by golden lions and Jaime ride away smiling, and he had no gift for soft knives. He nodded to Tomard, who disappeared into the press and then returned with a woman in plain wool, her eyes red. She clutched a bundle tied in a shawl. A city watch sergeant hovered near, uncertain, but he had not dared the queen's gaze to seize her on his own, and Tomard's grip and the hand's command had brought her through. "Your Grace," Ned said, "this is Mhagan. The child is named Bara." A whispering rose and fell. Cersei's face did not move. "I will not be made to witness your peasant theatrics." The woman was shaking. The bundle squirmed, and a small dark curl worked free of the cloth near the crown. Mhagan's voice was too thin for so big a room. He would come sometimes, Lord. He was gentle to me. He liked the babe, he did. He'd bring her ribbons. He said her hair would turn black as night like the king's. She swallowed. Only he didn't know she had it already. And then the gold cloaks. Her eyes found Slint and skittered away. They said the child must go to the brothel on Chatiah Street. But then I heard men were dying and I ran. "You brought a whore to court," Cersei said, but her voice was tight as a drawn bow. "You shame this hall." "I bring the realm," Ned answered, and then to Barristan. "When you donned that white cloak, you swore to guard the king with all your strength, to obey his commands, to keep his secrets, to counsel him, to defend his name and honor." He heard the words as if he had read them himself and found them to be iron. "Tell me, Ser Barristan, if the king's name is used to clothe a lie, is it honor to defend it?" Selmy's face was stone-beaten by rain and age. He looked from the child to the boy above. Joffrey stood with his sword out, trying not to tremble. The hound's black eyes watched everything. A murmur like wind through thorns rose and fell in the corners of the hall, where the city had crept in to see itself in steel. "The realm must know its king," Barristan said at last, and that was more than a murmur. It was a shifting underfoot, like the ice of a river thawing. He turned his head to the gold cloaks. "No man will draw steel in this hall today." Slint's gaze darted like a rat's. Littlefinger was close by his shoulder, fine as cobweb. Cersei moved, and that was the true danger. Ned saw the impulse in her. Strike now, as the cats do, claw and bite and yowl and get men to spilling guts while the confusion still belonged to her. He raised the letter higher. "Janos Slint," he said, not loud, but every ear was straining now. "By the king's hand and seal I am protector of the realm. In that capacity I command you, arrest the Queen Regent. Place Prince Joffrey in secure custody. No harm is to come to him, nor to the Princess Myrcella, nor to Prince Tommen." He swallowed the taste of ash, the knowledge that he had set his feet upon a bridge that would not hold half measures. "Protect them until the rightful heir shall come to claim the throne." For 3 heartbeats nothing happened. 3 heartbeats in which 1,000 futures drew breath. Ned watched Slint's eyes. The gold cloak was a thick man, dark with sweat though the hall was cool, a knife scar under his beard. He did not have the look of a man given to sudden brave choices. Littlefinger's whisper curled like smoke. Cersei's lips parted, white teeth behind ripe mouth. Then Slint looked up. He looked past the queen, past the boy, past the hand, to the old knight who had served 3 kings and watched 2 die. Barristan Selmy was not a man given to politics. He was the white line across a field where no man's feet had yet trod. What Slint saw there, Ned could not know. Perhaps he saw nothing more than an old man holding a sword in memory. But it was enough. The gold cloak lifted a hand, and his sergeants moved like a shoal. Meryn Trant's sword came half out of its sheath. The hound had risen to his feet without anyone seeing him stand. Cersei went very still, and then her hand flashed toward Joffrey, not to defend him but to hold him, and that too was a loud thing to every eye in the room. Boros Blunt made no motion to draw. He swallowed and looked ill at ease, as if he had eaten bad meat. "On whose word?" Cersei asked Janos Slint. "On whose?" "On the king's," Slint said. He jerked his chin at the parchment, at the wax, at the dead man's name. Then he nodded to his men, and the watch stopped being a wall and became hands and boots and the cold bite of iron. They took Joffrey's sword. He fought, he kicked and spit and shrieked, and 2 of the gold cloaks flinched as if they were men with sons of their own. They took hold of the queen. The queen did not struggle. "If you touch me roughly, sire, you'll die for it," she said in a voice soft as milk. They did not. They took her with gentleness that was somehow worse than violence. By whose right do you dare? Joffrey gasped. Tears streaked his face in pale tracks. I'll kill you, he told Ned, and then to Cersei. Mother, tell them, we are telling them, Cersei said, and her mouth was a hard thing. She looked at Ned Stark, and for the first time there was nothing to admire there, no brightness, no charm. There was steel and the promise of long patience in revenge. You have sown the wind, she told him. You will reap it. Ned's hand trembled, though only a little. He closed the book and gave it back to Alan. He looked to Varys and to Littlefinger. The eunuch bowed, such respect in that motion it mocked itself. Littlefinger's smile had not changed at all, though his eyes had cooled. Ned thought he saw there, for a heartbeat, something like relief. Then it was gone. Ser Barristan, Ned said, please escort them to the Queen's Tower. Set a guard. No harm to come to them. The old knight looked at him for the space of a breath. I serve the king, he said, as if reminding himself, and then he went to do as he was told. The hound gave a barking laugh that had no humor in it and stood aside, watching them bear the queen and the boy away. In the press, Sansa Stark was white as linen. She had thought it would be a pageant. Her hands opened and closed and did not know what to do. Ned caught her eye and wanted to go to her and could not. On a balcony above, Arya Stark leaned between two pillars, unnoticed but by one, Syrio Farrell, whose dark eyes missed little. He put a finger to his lips and the little wolf rolled herself back into shadow as if she'd been born to it. The hall emptied by degrees. The court evaporated into corridors like spilled water. Pycelle stood and gaped and then waddled out, clutching his chain to his chicken breast. Littlefinger drifted near as if he had always meant to. You overturn the board, my lord, he said lightly, so lightly a breath might scatter it. You do know the pieces will not sit nice for you now. I am not playing, Ned said. Littlefinger's mouth said oh. His eyes said something else. You are protector, he said. Robert loved you. You have the king's hand and the king's old hound at your heel. Enjoy it. It is always winter in the end. I find I prefer autumn. He looked toward the doors where the queen had gone. I should go and, what is it the small folk say? See which way the wind blows. He bowed at the waist with exquisite mockery. Lord Protector. When he was gone, Varys hovered closer. He smelled of lemon and powder. Such a bold stroke, he sighed, and there was admiration in it honest as anything Varys ever gave. Swift. How the realm prizes swiftness, save when it is not prepared. And the realm is never prepared. A pity about the child. He looked so well in a crown. I mean him no harm, Ned said. Nor the others. He rubbed at his scar. The old hurt had been quiet at the start of the day and now sang. We will send for Lord Stannis. The right is his. He is the rightful heir. He must be summoned to take his place. Varys drifted his eyes wandering as if birds flew where only dust floated. Lord Stannis, he repeated as a man in a play might speak of winter. Such a just man. Just men are like ice on a river, the strongest thing but unforgiving. The city floats on warmer waters. The Tyrells have long vines. The Martells long memories. The Lannisters long arms. The Lannisters have my men's blood on their hands, Ned said, and that was that. Varys folded upon his own respect. As you please, Lord Protector. He folded the word protector into his mouth the way a master taster folds wine. He rolled it, he tested it, he kept no note of his judgment. Outside, the bells began to toll, slow and sonorous, as if the city felt death strolling through it on velvet feet. The sound traveled along the stone and into Ned's hip and made of him an instrument that trembled. He went down to the dungeons to look upon the cells and their locks. He walked the Queen's Tower to see with his own eyes that the rooms there were furnished and the windows barred and the guard doubled. He spoke to Barristan in a low and private place. I cannot be your judge, the Lord Commander said, nor hers. I am a sword in a story older than us both. If you set where to strike, I will strike. until another king says otherwise. There will be no striking, Ned said. I will have no child's blood spilled for this. He thought of what he was doing and saw in it all the fracture lines that might break. He thought of winter in Winterfell, of the gray sky that sits so close to the earth it seems you might put your hand up and press a palm mark into it. He thought of his girl in a stranger city and knew he must send her away. Ser Barristan, can I trust you to guard them and not be used? You can trust me to take my vows as oaths, Lord Stark, Barristan answered, and in his tired eyes there was something like pity. That night, Ned watched the city gather itself like a giant rolling in sleep. Lights burned later than they had since Robert's tourneys, as if every house and shop must stay awake to prove their loyalty to something, anything. He found Arya crouched in the shadows near the back stairs, a wooden sword hilt jutting from her belt like a vulgar joke. You're not to carry that, he said, and she jutted a lip at him that was all Lyanna for the heartbeat it lasted. I thought they'd take you, she said, her voice brittle as the edge of a thin cup. I thought they'd take you and I'd have to stick them with the pointy end. Who told you to say that? He asked, though he knew. Syrio, Arya said. He says you move your feet first. He says people are slow because their thoughts are too heavy. She frowned. He says kings are slowest of all. He knelt and winced. Syrio is very wise, he said. He wanted to gather her in, to put her under his skin, to be rid of all the bricks and blades in the world. Tomorrow, Arya, I will send you and your sister north. I will send you with men I would trust with my life. You must go quickly and be obedient. There will be no heroics. There will be no sticking of anyone with any end. Do you understand me? She wanted to refuse him because she was Shiriek of the Alley Cats and any other name she'd woven around herself. But she saw his face and swallowed it. Yes, she said, but if they try to hurt you, I am old. He smiled. They will find me hard to lift. Go to bed now. Sansa had gone to her bed weeping quietly, not for the boy but for the idea of him. He stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her breathe, thinking of the Tully girl he had married and how dim she had seemed to him at first, how bright she had become when he learned how to look. You could not make a child into what you wanted, you could only hold them while the world did. By morning, the city was two cities. One that whispered in markets and under bridges that the Hand had arrested the royal family, and another that shrugged and said there was always a Hand and always a king and bread was dear. The Queen's brother was gone with the army. The Queen's father was in the Riverlands with old grievances uncoiled like snakes. Even the cobbles seemed to hold a breath. Ned sent ravens to Dragonstone, to Storm's End, to Riverrun, to White Harbor, and even to Dorne. The words were plain. Robert was dead. The boy was not his. Stannis was to be summoned. Order would be kept. Order, Littlefinger said when he came to take a polite leave, a bag in his hand, as if he were a tradesman going to a wedding. Will you buy some? The price has gone up. He held up 2 fingers. I can offer 2 pieces of advice as a parting gift. 1, do not give the small folk a king they have never seen and expect them to love him. 2, do not send your daughters out of the city dressed like little Northmen. 12 sells words and a closed carriage in the right color. Now that is safe passage. I am already paying you for your services, Ned said, the least of which is not your silence. Littlefinger laughed softly. You cling so hard to your honor, you cannot feel the weight of other things in your hands. It is a wonder you hold anything at all. He bowed low, and there was no mockery in it this time, a strange thing. I go to the Vale, he said. Lady Lisa is lonely. Perhaps I will bring her a canary. You should write your lady wife. Wars make widows of men not yet dead. When you come back, Ned said, and did not have to say if, you will find a different city. It is always a different city, Littlefinger said, and was gone. He did not go to the Vale by the old river gate that day. 2 hours later, Varys's little birds told the Hand that Lord Baelish had left by a postern in the Red Keep and taken a fast horse on the Rosby Road, with a different bag and a different smile for the guards.
Ned nodded.
It was in the nature of fish to swim. Slint played the loyal head of the city watch as men before and after him have played parts handed them. He took commands. He bowed and smiled and posted twice the usual men where Ned ordered them. He took gold that came by night from a quiet man in gray velvet whose name never appeared in the Watch's book. Then he hesitated. Then he kept the gold. Men are collection jars for fear and pride and hunger, and when you shake them you hear coins. Ned had shaken Slint. The day in the throne room had put a weight upon the scale the Lannisters' coin had not. He sent Sansa and Arya out with Septa Mordane and Vayan Poole and a dozen hand-picked veterans in brown cloaks and plain hats, wrapped in the disguise of slowness rather than swiftness. He sent them not by river, which was watched, nor by the King's Road, which was hunted, but through the warren of lanes the butcher's boys used and the walkway that went behind the tailors where cats kept court and women hung laundry like flags of surrender. He watched them go and did not breathe until word came at noon that they were on the far side of the city, that they had found a farmer with a hay wagon who owed the hand 3 favors that he would never admit to owing. Only then did he lean against the stone and let the wind hit him and wonder who he had not saved. It was always a ledger. That afternoon, he received a letter written in a firm and ugly hand. Lord Stark, your claim is a grave charge. The consequences are grave. The law is as you say. Come to Dragonstone and bend your knee. Bring the boy and the queen or a promise that they will be brought. Do this and you will be confirmed as protector until my arrival. Fail and you will be treated as a traitor to the rightful king. Stannis of House Baratheon, by rights king of Westeros. Ned stared at it and smiled despite everything. The letter smelled of ink and iron. He sent one back that smelled of the same and said, "Come. I hold them safe. The city will be kept." He sealed it with wax and his direwolf sigil and sent it on a bird sworn to find its way through storms. Then he poured wine on Robert's tomb that evening in the September and told the dead man what he had done. "He will not be loved," he said to the statue that looked nothing like Robert's laughter. "But he will be right. Better that than ashes in the streets." The ashes, when they came first in the riverlands. Tywin Lannister's banners moved like fire. Every stream of red and gold a flailing tongue that burned granaries and left the char behind to be sifted by old women. Gregor Clegane's men carried heads for mileposts. Ravens flew to King's Landing with their bellies heavy with news and their feet raking at the sky. Catelyn Tully read the messages in her father's house. Her face turned to Riverlight. "They come too fast," she told Robb, who had grown into his father's height while she was looking away. "They are not hunting knights. They are hunting fear." Her son wanted to ride. He had been gathering men since she sent for him when she took Tyrion Lannister upon the high road like a choice maid and regretted in a single breath. He had been making war in his own blood since she had tied a cloak across his shoulders and called him a man. Ned's letter arrived amid the smoke. He read that his father lived. He read that Stannis Baratheon would come to sit where Robert had. He read that Sansa and Arya were gone north ahead of him. He read that he was to march with all haste to Riverrun to break Tywin's line and relieve Lord Hoster. He looked up at his mother. "Then that is what we will do," he said, and the men who loved him for his father's sake cheered him for his own. At Casterly Rock, beneath walls that glowed in sunset as if the whole castle were forged from one burning jewel, Lord Tywin read a different collection of words. He had the look of a man who had lost a pawn and now must sacrifice a knight to compensate. Jaime Lannister laughed when he heard the news of Joffrey's seizure, then stopped laughing when he saw his father's mouth. "You would have done the same," he said, tossing a peach he had stolen from a boy by the stables, reckless, golden, doomed to be loved by those who were determined to be hurt. "They have no proof anyone will believe. Hair means nothing. Proof matters less than the number of swords that believe," Tywin said. He pushed the peach away as if it were a trivial insult. "The boy is gone to our enemies. The queen is no longer free to play at court. The old knight is not with us." He looked at his son. "You will ride to break the Tullis. I will hold Harrenhal and make the trident ours. The rock will remain the rock. This is not undone with anger." Jaime weighed the sword he had in his hand as a man might weigh a joke he didn't know if he should tell. "Shall I fetch the boy back for mother? That would be a tale for singers." You will fetch me back my standing in the riverlands, Tywin said. Save me from singers. Their memory is a disease. He paused. And avoid the Northmen if you can. He will not forgive you what you did on the Street of Silk. Jaime tossed the peach into the air and caught it and bit. I fear no man in the 7 kingdoms, he said around the juice, and I fear his honor least of all. He rode with 3,000 knights and men-at-arms and more foot than that, banners snapping like small storms, and if drunken songs were sung about him at night, he encouraged them and sang along. In Dragonstone, the storms beat at a fortress that looked like something a dragon might have dreamt and never built. Stannis Baratheon stood at the old window casements that had been Aegon's once and watched the rain slit the sea into sheets. Davos Seaworth stood at a respectful distance and said softly, Your Grace. Stannis did not turn. You do not like the style, he said, and there was a bite to it, like a man testing a blade upon the pad of his thumb. Davos swallowed. I like it well enough for my king, he said, and that too was a test. The city will be a snare. The gold cloaks run where the coin pours. The small folk are reeds in a flood. The law is a stone, Stannis said. It holds. He turned then, and the candles turned his face into a map of hard places. He has given me the boy and the bitch. I did not ask it of him. He chose his path. He is honest. It is a poor shield in war. But I would rather an honest shield than a gilded lie. Melisandre glided into the room as if borne on heat. She smelled of smoke, of something that had been burned on purpose. Her hair fell like the night behind her. The ruby at her throat breathed as if a heart lay there. The Lord of Light makes straight the path of the righteous, she said, and the flames show a city waiting for a true king. Davos made a warding sign with his stump hidden in his sleeve, then hated himself for the superstition. We will need ships, he said. The fleet is good, but not enough to stand against a storm in truth or a storm made of men with Lannister gold in their pockets. We will need friends. We need no friends but the Lord of Light, the Red Woman said. All other friends are reeds indeed. Stannis's mouth drew down. We need men who will stand when I command it. Your Lyseni beliefs are your own, woman. In my council we will speak of ships and wheat and iron. He looked to Davos. You will go to White Harbor, to Lord Manderley. He eats and eats and eats. He will eat my words if I make them rich. I will need a landing upon the Mander before the winter is over. He put a hand upon Davos's arm, quick and hard. Do not fail me. I never have, Davos said, and did not add I have, oft enough, but always in small ways. He went to his ship, to the black sails that had saved Stannis once long ago when the sea had kept him from food and the city from loyalty. He sailed while the sea gnawed itself and the sky spat, because the weather does not much care if men are kings. In King's Landing, the Queen's Tower held its new occupants like a hand might hold a nest of wasps, gently enough not to make them sting themselves to death. Cersei sat before a window and watched the river as if the sight of it would make it split and drown her enemies. Joffrey sulked in the room beyond and threw things until he ran out of things to throw, and then threw the words his mother had taught him. Myrcella sat quietly with her dolls and talked to them, her voice a stream that ran between stones. Tommen ate until his stomach hurt and then cried because it hurt. They were children, which is a more flexible thing than a man often allows. Cersei learned the guards' names one by one. She gathered them into her speech with promises and coin and looks. She sent for Pycelle, who came with trembling hands and a shaking conscience and chicken broth that smelled like sorrow. She sent for the High Septon and asked him what mercy was. She sent for no one who could tell her how to do anything but bear this like a queen. She did that well. When Ned came to speak to her, she smiled as if she were sitting at table. You think yourself clever, she said mildly, and he suppressed the urge to say no. I think myself tired. I think Stannis will sit the throne, he said. I think you can make that easier or harder. The children will be spared if you are wise. They will be sent to fosterage where they can do the least harm to themselves. Dorne, perhaps. Oldtown. A man who has sons of his own and no wish to play at crowns. You will steal my children and then call it mercy, she said. Do you know, Stark, That there are things a woman can do that you have no language for? Try to steal the breath out of a lioness' mouth and see how softly she lets you keep your fingers. Her eyes were very green. You have left my father nothing to do but burn the riverlands down to their stones. My brother will kill your boy if he can find him. Ned held himself still. Jaime will learn he is not so good a swordsman as he thinks if he meets my son, he said, and felt a splinter of pride and fear. He will learn what kind of man Robb is. Cersei tilted her head. Do you think any of this is about men? She asked. I promise you, Lord Stark, that no man will save you from me if I choose to end you. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. He left the tower and went to see Ser Barristan. The old knight stood in the small yard where the Kingsguard trained and watched a young man in white beat at a post with the flat of his blade until his arms shook. Ares, Barristan said, and the young knight stopped and bowed to Ned, breathless, his face a boy's. Lord Stark, he puffed, how do we serve? By guarding those you are sworn to guard, Ned said. It was the right answer and not enough. He knew that truth like he knew the shape of the cold under the ribs. War moves by messages the way the ocean moves by tides. Men call it fate when they forget names. Messages came to King's Landing with the wings beaten off of them. In the alleys, the gold cloaks cut down 3 Lannister bowmen who had fancied themselves bold enough to skulk and strike at a Stark guard posting. In the Riverlands, Robb Stark crossed the Green Fork with a cunning that made old men who barely remembered their own first battles rub their chins and mutter that the boy's father had not wasted his sense on a second son. He took the road the Lannisters named safe, turned when they were listening to a story, and put Jaime Lannister in a ring of trees where songs go to die. They called it the Whispering Wood afterward. Jaime's horse went down under him with a scream. Jaime cut his way free of a knot of Karstark men and laughed and stopped laughing when Grey Wind came, jaws snapping, and the Northmen knew to make a space for the direwolf and the lord who owned him. In the end, it was not Robb who took Jaime but a mailed hand that belonged to a bannerman whose name would never be sung. That is how capture works. They sent Jaime to Riverrun Trust like a holiday pig, and Robb took his mother's kiss for victory and said, quieter to the men who would hear it, this is not the end. At Harrenhal, Tywin received the news with the contempt of a king who finds the meat overcooked. He told his table, my son is in a boy's hands. He picked a glittering shard of fat from the meat before him and put it in his mouth. We will take him back. You can march on Riverrun, Tyrion said from the far end, where his seat was half a courtesy and half a joke. Or you can march on King's Landing. You cannot do both at once. Your enemies multiply like rabbits. Stannis comes through the sea gate. The wolf boy comes down the neck. The trout put you on the far side of a river. And the realm watches to see whether the lion jumps or slinks. His wine was good and red, and he sipped it as if his throat hurt. The mountain clans he had gathered on his way had taken to calling him Halfman with a fondness that tasted like irony. He had more friends than he'd had when he left King's Landing and fewer than he'd hoped for. He had a resolve to live that would not die even when very clever men wished it dead. Tywin Lannister turned his head like a man remembering a net. You will ride to my grandson, he said. Take gold, take oaths, take lies if you need them. Secure the city watch, secure the gate, secure the Red Keep. Make allies of them with the weight of chests. If Stannis comes, King's Landing must be a trap and not a prize. Go. Tyrion lifted his cup in salute that was almost mockery but almost not. As you wish. He thought of his nephew howling. He thought of his sister's mouth ablade. He thought of a dwarf's habit of surviving bigger storms. He went. In the city, the smell of tar and salt came with the first ships of Stannis' fleet like the warning before rain. The harbor bristled with masts as if some enormous hedgehog had curled itself up against the river's mouth. The gold cloaks stood too deep at the quays and too deep again along the Street of Sisters. Ned Stark went down among them and walked along the water and saw Davos Seaworth climb from his black ship and thought, here is a man without finery who does not mind that fact. Lord Protector, Davos said, bowing as if he had never bent before any man but one. He had honest eyes and a face the years had tried to make clever, like water trying to make a stone soft. "You are late," Ned said without heat. "But the sea cares less for schedules than my wife does." "That is true," Davos said. "She makes a better stew, too." Ned almost smiled. He led Davos to the Red Keep by the back ways and showed him the Queen's Tower and its guards, the way the keys were kept, the old iron, the measure of each chain. Davos nodded at everything as if he were counting it and carrying it to his king one by one under his coat. "They live well," Davos said when he had seen the rooms for Joffrey and his siblings. "I do not intend to starve children," Ned said, and the Onion Knight acknowledged the decency with a small tilt of the head that did not say it was weakness. He had learned not to insult a stronger man with gratitude. Stannis came ashore with less ceremony than Robert would have given a boar hunt. He wore black, and the stags upon him were like ink spilled into parchment, thin and stern. He did not smile. He did not look upon the city in wonder. He had walked its walls when his brother had given him the dirty work of wars and the honor that came with doing it. He greeted Ser Barristan with a nod that was not unkind, and Ned with the grip of a man who valued bones that held. They stood in the throne room together, and Stannis did not look at the throne. He looked at the chairs that had been set for council. "Do we stand on form?" he asked. "Or do we make war?" "We keep peace in the city," Ned said. "We make war where it belongs." "You keep my nephew," Stannis said. "Show him to me." They brought Joffrey in with 4 guards and a chain upon his wrists. Joffrey saw Stannis and spit. "Bastard," he said. "Usurper." The boy made the words sound like stones he'd found, heavy and ugly. Stannis bore it as he bore rain. He looked at the child as if he were a puzzle with 2 pieces missing and 1 extra piece that did not belong to this box. "You are not to blame for what your mother did," he said. "But you are what she made of it." Joffrey lunged then, trying to bite. The guard twisted his wrist and brought him to heel with a speed that is mercy in a jailer. Stannis looked to Ned. "I cannot let him live to be a focus for enemies," he said, as if he were discussing a rotten beam in a roof. "The law is not a salve. It is a knife that cuts rot. Yet he is a child." The words cost him something. Stannis did not like to share the weight of his own thoughts. "What do we do, Lord Stark?" Ned kept his face steady. "If he dies now, the city will remember you as the man who killed a boy before the throne. If you send him to the wall to live and die in black, the realm sees justice without needless cruelty. He lives without heirs that could trouble the realm. It puts him beyond his mother's reach." He thought of Benjen then, an old speech about honor and choice and cold. "The wall is not mercy. It is simply far away." Stannis considered. Consideration sat upon him like mail. "So be it," he said. "Let it be done." "The other 2. Tommen is the gentler," Ned said, "and Myrcella the cleverer. Send them to fosterage where their lives can be something other than a threat. Dorne would take the girl and keep her safe. They have little love for your house or mine, but they love children. Old Town might take the boy. The Citadel has laws older than any of ours that can be leaned on to protect him." Stannis nodded once, as a judge acknowledges a fair argument. "So be it." The mother. Cersei Lannister came when sent. She was not dragged. She wore white without ornament and looked as if she were a bride to some unfathomable expectation. She saw Stannis and did not look away. "Do you know, Lord Stannis," she said, "that you were the only one of Robert's brothers who never tried to charm me?" She smiled, a weapon wrapped in lace. "You were right. It would never have worked." "I do not charm," Stannis said. "No," she said, "you do not. And yet you might have been king if you had learned how." She let her eyes drift to the throne and back. "So, shall I thank you for your mercy to my children before you kill me? You are charged with treason and with adultery and with unnatural crimes," Stannis said. He did not raise his voice. "You will be tried under the law." "I will not kneel," she said. She lifted her chin. "I will not confess." "I did not ask you to," Stannis said, and the clink of chains was very loud after that. Ned sought quiet when he could find it in the days that followed. but quiet was a meadow men had decided was theirs and used to train horses. The streets flowed with rumor. The Septons preached that justice had returned to King's Landing on iron-shod feet. The guild of alchemists muttered together like a cluster of old women too long in the same kitchen. Tyrion Lannister arrived at the mud gate with 2 litters of gold and 10 jokes and found the watch more obliging than he'd expected and less hopeful than he'd hoped. He went straight to Ned and bowed because he was clever enough to know when to bow. "I have come to help you keep the peace," he said with an expression of innocence so brazen that even Varys blinked. "The city watch grows restless when it is not fed on time. The small folk grow restless when the bakers water the flour. The nobles grow restless when their letters go unanswered. Let me do as I do." "Be careful," Ned said. "I was born careful," Tyrion said, and hid a smile under his beard he had done nothing to grow. Stannis held court with a severity that was not cruelty. He sat and listened to petitions and refused to lean upon any man's affection. He confirmed Ned as protector until coronation and began the slow work of making rightful rule something more than words. He had the crown remade, not in rubies and gold but in black steel set with a stag of onyx that seemed ready to leap. "A king should wear his burden," he told Ned, when the Northern Lord lifted the weight and felt it. "Let the singers praise the shine and the whores kiss it when another man roots in their lap." The Red Woman watched all of it as if it were a fire she had set to cook a meal only she would eat. She came to the sept once and stood before the stranger's altar and smiled faintly as if greeting an old friend. The High Septon found excuses not to be in his own house for the space of 2 hours that day. When Renly Baratheon set his own crown upon his head in the rose-tinged tents of the Tyrell encampment near Bitterbridge, the banners like a garden in a dream and the nights like summer made into men, the realm shivered as if fever were a woman with cold hands. He laughed as he took the cheers and kissed his bride-to-be, Marjorie Tyrell, upon her ring, then upon her mouth, then upon her smile. "My brother is a good soldier," he told the lords who mattered. "I am a good king." Lord Mace puffed and preened and muttered about feasts. Loras Tyrell smiled very prettily and thought very hard about war. Messages flew from Bitterbridge as if cast by a child's hand to see how far they might go. One arrived in King's Landing on the back of a hawk the Tyrells kept in a tower for such purposes. Renly demanded what men who are handsome and beloved often do: obedience without having purchased it first. Stannis read the letter and burned it in a candle. "He is a thief," he said. "A thief who steals a thing because he thinks it will be admired upon him." Ned went to the window and watched the river carry light. "He has more men than you," he said. "They love him better than they will ever love you." "I do not want their love," Stannis said, as if that settled the matter. "You will need their swords," Ned said, as if that settled it too. The war that might have come to King's Landing came instead to the kings, and there is mercy in that for the small folk. Renly marched with all the silk in the reach hung upon him like armor. Stannis came from the Stormlands like the storm that had named him. In the pre-dawn dark before they met in earnest, the shadow took shape in Stannis's tent, threw a long, tall man upon a cot and strangled his breath while he slept. It put its hands around Renly's throat and tightened while Renly's half-open eyes looked for love that could not come. It left a green shell behind. Some said a woman in red had smiled and broken a candle. Some said the gods had learned new tricks. Most said nothing. The Tyrell's banners drooped like sun-wilted flowers. They were not fools. They had backed a man both beloved and possible. Now he was neither. Loras wept and then wiped his eyes and sharpened his sword. Mace counted how many wagons he would need to carry back all the feasts he had ordered but not eaten. Marjorie hid in her tent and stared at a mirror until her face became a doll's. When they came to King's Landing, they did not come to fight Stannis. They came to sell suitors. "We can make peace," the Lady Olenna wrote in a hand that looked like the work of a wasp. "We can make a husband for someone. We can make a match with a reach so long it seems to touch the moon." She meant Willis, whose leg did not work but whose mind did, and Shireen, whose face was marred by grayscale but whose blood was clean of lies. Stannis, who disliked both compromise and romance, found himself agreeing to a betrothal as a man might agree to feed a hungry hound in exchange for a night free of barking. It was good politics. It made him unhappy. That last is a description of Stannis's life. Ned watched from the sidelines and from the center alternately as the city learned that justice had a different face than it had grown used to. The gates were patrolled. The bread was measured. The guilds were made to pay what they owed and were given back what had been stolen from them by men who took their coin with seals rather than knives. Varys's whispers gathered and were put to use where it did the least harm. Tyrion Lannister found ways to make the watch look like a blade Stannis himself had sharpened. He curbed Slint's worst and left his habit of taking coin alone. Habits like that never die, and sometimes they are useful. He drank with the men who thought they hated him and made them laugh. He took his sister's boy to the river in secret and had him watch fishermen mend their nets. He did whatever he could think of to make sure no one thought to look for him with a knife. He had a talent for that. When the trial came for Cersei, the hall filled again, and this time the motes in the light moved like a swarm. She stood without tremor and listened to names. Jaime had not been captured then. He would write her later a letter that smelled of leather and road dust, and it would not reach her because ravens often have to choose between the hand that feeds them and the fields they love. Stannis listened to evidence and to silence. He sentenced her to death because the law said so and because the realm would not be served by a living queen who could make men into swords with a glance. Ned stood within his skin and felt each rib like a bar of a cage. He thought of mercy and of justice and of how they hate each other as often as they kiss. That night he went to the Queen's Tower and told her himself. "I will die," she said. "As a queen, as a woman," he said softly, and she laughed because it was the last weapon she had, and it is a good one. "Spare my children," she said, as if she had not heard him plan to do precisely that from the first moment he had taken the letter to the hall. "If you spare them, I will go quiet." "They are spared," he said. "The small boy goes to Old Town when he is ready. He will be made into something that cannot wear a crown. The girl goes to Dorne with a guard greater than many kings have traveled with. The elder boy goes to the wall." "He will not go," she said. "You do not know him." "He will go," Ned said, "because I will take him there myself." He paused. "I would not trust this to any other man." She closed her eyes then, and a tear slid from underneath her lashes, and he pretended not to see. "You are cruel," she said. "You might have been a hero if the world were different." "I might have been a farmer," he said. "We do not get to choose." He took Joffrey north. He did not relish the journey. Joffrey tried to run twice. The first time a gold cloak caught him because the boy had chosen to sprint in boots meant for halls, not hedges. The second time he went at Ned with a knife he had taken from a cook and was wrestled by a man who had been a piping boy in Winterfell and knew tricks no Lannister had seen. The third time Joffrey did not run. He walked beside Ned in a silence full of words he saved like stones to throw later. At the wall, the wind made knives of itself and cut the cheeks of men and boys alike. Joffrey saw the thing that is older than kings and had no words for it. He knelt when told, and the old bear's eyes measured him as a man measures rope. There were conversations held in private. The old man asked Ned if he was certain. "We have had king's blood here before," he said. "We do not thrive on it." Ned thought of the city and the law and of his girls somewhere safe upon the road. "He will live," he said. "He will be a man in black. That is all that is left for him." Joffrey stood with the other boys and men at the weirwood and scratched his name into ice, which made no mark. He said the words. He said them in a voice that was almost a voice. He did not look up to see the ravens stir at the sound. When it was done, he stumbled and did not let himself fall. Ned thought of his own boy in Winterfell and felt something catch in him and not break. When he came south again, the realm was quieter than any man would have predicted, which is usual when men stop being so clever and do the plain thing. Stannis wore the crown like a chain and did not spill wine on it. He held to justice until the city chafed. He made marriages like a mason makes walls, without romance and with an eye to storms. He kept Davos near and sent him where the working of the realm was not glamorous and thus most necessary. He forgave Tyrion nothing he could count and counted less than he might. He sent gold to the Riverlands and took oaths from men who had given such sounds before and broke them. He took Riverrun's submission with a dry nod and sent Jaime Lannister to the Black Cells, where the Kingslayer laughed at rats and at certain jokes that only made sense to him. He cut the tongues out of a handful of men who had organized a riot in the Leatherworkers' ward and paid the Leatherworkers 3 times what they asked for their damages. Cersei Lannister died with her head high and her mouth smiling. The city watched and did not cheer. The city learned that there are kings who end legends. Robb Stark came to King's Landing with the river winds in his hair and bent the knee to the King Stannis once the Riverlands were relieved and the hostage taken. He bowed and rose straight and said, "I have done my duty," in a voice that had no boy in it. He walked with his father under the bare branches in the gardens behind the Red Keep and spoke of quiet skulls and noisy men. "They called me king because they were angry," he said. "They call you wise because they are afraid. I would rather be neither." "You will be a good lord," Ned said. "I hope it is a long time before you must be a great one." They sent Arya further north to Winterfell because she never recovered her breath in the city. She was a wolf pup that snarled at alleys and at men who looked at her wrong. Sansa they sent to the Vale for a time. She loved the sky when she could walk to it on a narrow path and hold it by the hand. She learned to see beauty in stone that had no silk upon it. When Littlefinger came to court 3 winters later, he found a different girl with the same face, and it vexed him as only the passing of time vexes a man who believes he can keep a thing by naming it. There are no neat endings. There are only rivers with many mouths. One mouth opened in the east, where a girl with white hair learned to hold death in her lap and call it mercy and be wrong and be right. One mouth opened in the far north, where on certain nights the sky moved like a sheet and men heard things walking that should not know how to walk. One mouth opened under the rock, where a father wrote 1 letter more and sealed it with wax and with the hard thought that he had lost not to a man but to a choice. Another opened where a black-haired boy whose gaze had once been bright and cruel learned that cold can cure certain illnesses of the soul at a cost, and that the things you deserve are not often the things you get. Ned Stark woke each morning and did the work before him. He watched Stannis grow thinner and more kingly, which is a kind of illness all rulers catch. He watched his daughters grow apart and then toward one another, 2 lines on a page that the gods loved. He watched his son learn to rule a river country that did not love him, because men love things that reflect them back. He wrote letters to Jon Snow that were taught with care and had to be burned because wisdom is wind. He kept the book of lineages, though he never opened it again. He walked sometimes when the city slept, past the places where men had fought and died because another man had put words into the air that hardened into law. One evening, as the sun tore itself a little upon the hills and bled into the river, Varys found him in a courtyard where the scent of orange blossoms was almost enough to drown the smell of the drains. "You have kept the peace," the eunuch said in a way that suggested he might be impressed. "It is a pity. So many people find their fortune in chaos." "There is enough chaos in war," Ned said, and Varys's mouth smiled and his eyes did not. "And you believe you have made war unnecessary." The eunuch looked up at the rust upon a wrought iron grill as if reading a future there. "You are fond of the word right. The wrong men will still play with it. They will break it like children break toys. Then we will take their toys away," Ned said, and Varys laughed. It was a soft sound like a pillow being struck, and it went out into the air and drew no notice. On the day Stannis Baratheon was crowned in the Great September, under glass that made the light into colors, Ned remembered Robert's laugh and wanted to weep for it. He watched as the crown went from a cushion to a priest's hands to a head that would bear it until death, and he felt nothing heroic, only a low, tired hope. The city cheered as it will cheer anything in the proper season. The sword of the King's Guard flashed. The bells rang. Afterward, they stood together in a small room where a pitcher of water waited like a reward. Stannis drank no wine that day. He looked at Ned and said, "I will not be loved, nor will you burn the realm trying to make it," Ned said. Stannis closed his eyes briefly, as if that cost him in ways he would not show. "I will make it ordered," he said. "If they hate me, they will at least know where to put it." Outside, the court resumed its life. Tyrion told a story in the green and made the Queen's men laugh despite themselves. Davos wrote a letter to a son in a hand that cramped. Sansa fed a bird in the rookery and smiled at the way it cocked its head. Arya tied back her hair and went to the yard and sparred with a boy who fought like he would learn. Robb walked the river and thought about stones and bridges and men. Catelyn lit a candle for a husband who lived and for a brother who was well, and for a father whose breath came shallow and slow in the house by the river where the light fell as it had always fallen. The Iron Throne did not sing. It was always singing for blood. But for a little time it hummed a quieter tune, like an old saw cutting old wood. There were still knives. There were still plots. There were still nights when the city woke and smelled smoke that had no source and wept for it. There were still kings across the sea and in the shadow of winter. There were still men who believed themselves gods because other men had knelt. But a boy who should never have sat a throne sat upon a cold stone wall instead and learned wind. A woman who had thought herself above the law lay under it. A man who wanted love learned to take respect and make a crown of it. The world did not end. It never does. It folded its sorrow and its noise and put them away on a high shelf for later. And if, sometimes under the heavy sun, Ned Stark remembered the way Cersei had held her son's arm in the hall, like a woman who knows what a trap looks like and knows it has sprung, and if he wished then that the gods had made him a baker or a soldier or anything but what he was, he kept that to himself and did the next right thing he could find. That is not a story men tell their sons. It is only what happened, and that, of all things, is the dullest and the bravest.